What point and at what age does that thinking change is what I'm asking.
At the third minute.
Answer me first before you go on
I'm
your...
letting him go.
Well, I was responding to something else. You want...
I can answer you.
Me.
Anybody answer me, please.
One, it don't ever change until you find something else to supplement that income. And that's the gift and the curse of the streets. The same way it's the gift and the curse of the bartender chicks. Until you find something else that can... One of my niggas lost his job. And he was like, yo, dog, back to the streets. The streets are always there for me as an alternative.
Always on. Yeah.
So until you find something else that supplements that income. So now we see, especially in New York, it's a worldwide broadcast. I can only speak for New York. Now you see all the old bartenders, all the old strippers getting into the real estate
selling
game.
Frenchies. They all selling Frenchies. They breeders. They all dog breeders. Yeah, they selling Frenchies. Yeah, I know shit.
I got two homegirls that sell dogs.
I know what's going on. I'm the ghetto whisperer. I disagree with what you're saying because you know why? In my experience, when people change, the answer to that is when you grow up to a certain extent, when you get baptized or you take shahada.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy, the Black Anglo-Saxon, and I'm back today with another video. We're going to be real quick today. I just wanted to respond to this insert that y'all just saw from the Joe Budden Podcast. I thought it was real important because I did a video on the meritocracy trap and how we African Americans, ADOS specifically, get caught in that meritocracy trap over and over again. And this conversation that they're having now is just basically centered around people being caught up by circumstance. And I think it's important because a lot of people love to have the conversation and talk about the fact that people aren't willing to work hard or people aren't willing to change to get ahead. And I think that's a misnomer, and I think that is misguided in terms of how we think. And I think that light-skinned dude's name is Ish, and he's explaining to them, is like, look, until you have a mechanism to be able to create not just the change, but the momentum. Because I think when we have these conversations, we get so lost in the fact that, you know, it requires somebody to not have these type of unfortunate events come up in their life over a certain period and amount of time to be able to accumulate that compounded interest of what we consider as stability, to be able to create an environment conducive so that one can actually produce in. Because there's one thing, you take working out for an analogy, right? It's one thing to work out, eat healthy, and do certain things for a week or two, or even a month, right? You may see a small amount of results based on how you've lived that life in the past. But if you don't continue and do that over a longer amount of period of time, it doesn't give you the amount of capacity for your body to adapt so that you can actually see those larger gains and create a different lifestyle around it. And I think it's behoove us to be able to understand that when we're talking about this, because it also lends to the grace and the nuance that's required when we're having these conversations, because we're seeing in this economy right now, wealth continue to calcify and poverty continue to expand as a result of people, mainly white people, having also believed and perpetuated these narratives around the meritocracy trap. And I think right now it is, and people are being disillusioned to that, and that it has not a lot to do with how hard you're working or what it is they're alluding to, or being in the right. It really has a lot to do with being in the right place sometimes, talking to the right people sometimes, because you can be a person that work hard, but if you never, especially in this environment where social capital has kind of outpaced expertise in a lot of ways, we see the ability to be able to go viral or be in these certain social groups or social classes or cliques that has more value than being a skilled person. Because you can be skilled, but the skill doesn't necessarily get you into a well-paying job or an opportunity that may be able to allow you to take care of your family or get out of an environment or ecosystem and where you're being pulled 5, 4, 6 different ways that doesn't necessarily allow you to get both feet out. And a lot of people will even refer to this as the black tax, right? Because we know as a lot of people who even get out and make it out, we see ourselves being asked by family members, because you the person now with the money or you the person now with the access. And so now you have to make up for the shortcomings of the whole ecosystem, because a lot of the times we also make the mistake in talking about these things in a very individualistic manner, and is not, even though we are talking about people trying to propel or get ahead in an individual way, but no one person is made from individual choices. And I know that sounds crazy, but I have the choice to work hard. I have the choice to do things. But take this podcast, for example. If people don't like it, if people don't share it, if people don't do the things necessary to push it forward in this whole ecosystem of YouTube or social media, it doesn't necessarily rise, because we see moronic content and content that is foolish, and people continue to ask, well, why does that always rise to the top? Because it gets the most engagement. And so it goes the same for a person who is quote unquote trapped in desperation, right? Because when you are desperate, when you got to make bills, when you got to pay rent, when you got to do these certain things that are low level, barrier to entry lifestyle choices, you're going to choose survival. You're going to choose having to have the food on the table or the roof over your head. And so it's not necessarily, I don't think, again, in having grace, I don't think people get enough grace, but I think this is why some of these conversations shouldn't be had within certain demographics, because it gets warped. And a lot of people would say, well, yes, Joe Budden and them have a right to have a conversation. And yes, they absolutely do. But I think at the same time, they also have to be cognizant that what they're pushing out also serves as marketing and branding for the whole group and for the national ecosystem. So when people are having conversations and when people are trying to understand the plight or the circumstances of a person who is in the streets, they're going to hear this, they're going to consume it, because a lot of people are not necessarily close enough up on us to be able to have these conversations in a very well-informed manner. And even those who are well-informed still come up short, because we've all been fed stereotypes. We've all been fed tropes that feed into rugged individualism, that feed into hyper individualism, or that feed into not understanding that there is no such thing as being self made. We all have that person or that situation where somebody came in, gave us that opportunity to basically create the trajectory and the pathway to run down to create and get ourselves out of these certain circumstances. Because the dude Ish is right. It's not something that you necessarily outgrow. If I know how to build houses and that's what I do, and there's a market for building houses, and again, I know people are going to say it's not the same thing because it's not a bad stigma associated with building houses, but bear with me. That's what I'm going to do. Just because I want to transition into another industry or another job or another space, if those opportunities and those doors don't open, I'm going to fall back on what I do. I want to get more into the podcasting space. But guess what? Community development is going to be my bread and butter. If podcasting don't work, community development is what I'm going to do. And essentially, people are hardwired to use the skills, the advantages, their strengths to their best ability to survive, because that's what capitalism is. And so it's the same for the streets. The streets is a creation of people being locked out of the labor force. And because we've never really addressed that as a nation in full context and in full earnest, we still have the residue and the residuals of that. And welcome to niggerdom, because we aren't the only people experiencing that level of poverty yet. And I mean, we aren't the only people experiencing that level of poverty now, but we have learned ways to make it through. She made the joke at the end about the Frenchies, and that's just something that we do. We come up with ways to survive. But, it's still street to go out here selling Frenchies and basically not have the proper licensures to be breeding dogs, and you doing it in your one studio bedroom apartment is also some street shit. It ain't selling drugs, but it's some street shit because it's not going through the appropriate and the proper channels with the proper legal technicalities to do what it is you're doing. But you're finding a way. You're making a way. And I just wanted to bring in this other one, though, because it speaks to a joke that I always make about, everybody is 2 paychecks away from being the next Elon Musk because,
Nobody's trying to address the problems that are happening in America. Everybody's just trying to get rich enough so that way the problems don't impact them anymore.
Ooh, that's good.
Now, I'm a loop it. Nobody is trying to address the problems in America. They're trying to get rich enough to make sure that the problems in America don't impact them. And that's what I want to end on, because that is where everything breaks down in terms of the questions that people ask about why our politics don't work in America, why people won't come together in America to push back on a lot of the debauchery and nonsense that we're seeing right now. And it speaks to the notion and reinforces the street culture, the hustle culture, and just the hyper-individualism that allows one to sit up and have conversations around a topic that doesn't account for the whole ecosystem. Because everybody's trying to, instead of address the actual core problems in America, we are here trying to be 2 paychecks away from being the next Elon Musk. Because everybody wants generational wealth, but doesn't understand what generational wealth actually takes. And it's not money per se. It's a combination of money, it's a combination of assets, and it's a combination of power. If you do not have all 3, you cannot have and maintain generational wealth. Because if you have money with no power, people will come and take that. If you have money and no assets, you have nowhere to park your resources to be able for those resources to compound without being taxed or eaten up by a very aggressive taxation system, financial system in America. And if you don't have power, you do not have the ability to protect anything that you accumulate through all of the compounded work, labor, or any other things that you have done in terms of building family, etc. You need all of those things, which is why you need laws, because those are the protections. The power begets the laws, etc. But here we are, and we're still having conversations around the street because we don't understand the ecosystem, what is required to actually move forward in a way that removes you not just from your individual circumstance, but the ecosystem in a way that you can change and manipulate the environment, because otherwise you are just going to run into what everybody has ran into, is that the black tax. But what do I know? Leave a comment, like, share, subscribe. I appreciate y'all for watching another one, and enjoy.